Hello and welcome, Wolfpack, to another lesson on music and such. Last time we went over some basics in kind of a scattershot sort of way of what you can do with music and sort of just a nice basis to get you started. And so now I want to kind of dive deep and really dig in about certain aspects of music that can really further your understanding of these subjects as well as make it so you can, it just is another way to tackle it. I mean, everybody can use their ears and everybody can have what I always call lazy pitch to myself, which is where I just sort of, maybe just figure out what notes I want to hit, regardless of what I want to do. Now, what you're seeing here is a basic C major scale on the screen there, and I can show it to you as well with the staff. So now you can see it in both ways. No big deal. Just figured I'd show you the staff there. Not a huge thing. But so that's the staff, right? And so that's the scale. So the scale here is that. And the reason I'm pointing that out is this is kind of going to get a little music theory intensive, but not too much. I just want to show you sort of how things relate, because realistically, like anything else, music's based a lot on math. And if you can kind of count, you can really do some interesting things. And if you're stuck, you can kind of use math and just like really technical stuff to get you out of the slump so that you can continue on writing, or at least get you through the bump. That way you can go back to doing what you wanted to do. So, I do this all the time when I'm really at a loss of what to do. I use these techniques very frequently. So let me go over what the numbered chords mean. We're going to use a major scale here. So let me count the scale for you. Of course, it's fairly simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But think of those as Roman numerals. So, be like I, 2 I's, 3 I's. And the way they're written depends on what chord it is in the scale, right? So the first, and this goes for every scale, right? So it doesn't matter what scale it is. It's, I, 2 I, like 2 small I's because it's minor. So the difference between the small and the big is a major scale. And we went over that last time, and I'll show it again here so you can see it. But so 2 would be sixth, and then again, minor, major 4, 5, minor 6, which is my favorite. Minor, oops, I wrote that as 4, but that's all right. And then, of course, back to 1. All right. So the 8 is actually 1. So realistically, you're only thinking about 1 through 7. So you don't really have to even worry about anything too crazy. And the reason I'm labeling these for you here, and let me make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. Boom. So I'm just, because I can't label it on the other one, but let me make that even bigger. I just want to make sure you can see it there. All right, so you can see, and let me get out of lyrics mode and move these up 1 octave here. There you go. So this is the same scale. It's just a little different. And so you can see it's 1, see how that goes like that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's, 1 through 7 and then 8. And that's how it would be written on a minor scale. Now, what determines that is when you build the chord. Now, I did go over that last time, but as a quick recap, a major chord sounds happy and a minor chord sounds sad. And a major chord is just, you can tell the difference by the way it's built. And when you're in a key, generally speaking, of course there are exceptions, but generally speaking, you want to just keep to, everything in the chord or everything that's already in the key. So, so you don't really want to do anything fancy. So of course the first chord there, so it just sounds sadder because it's minor. Same thing for this guy. But this one's major. Like very happy. Yay! Versus okay. So and you know, this is A minor, my favorite chord right here, which is the 6th of the C scale. We're using the C scale because there's no sharps or flats to worry about. Again, we went over those last time, but it's just that they're the in-between notes because of course you have these 8 or these 7, but there's another 4 that are kind of in between that are on the black keys you can see on the piano roll, which is right here. So those notes there. Excuse me. So I just wanted to recap that really, really quickly because it's good to give it on. So that is the example of C major. So C would be major 1, so that's just C major, and then minor 2 would be B, or D rather, excuse me, which is minor because you don't have the necessary things to make it major, because when you made it, you can look on the internet of what is a major scale, but you can tell it doesn't sound happy. But I can teach you how to build a chord in a minute here, which I'm going to do as soon as I get this at the right spot. Okay, so let me pull it back over to piano roll because again, it's all counting, and I just really want to go over this because that way you can tell which a minor chord is and which a major chord is. You can look up whichever chords you want online. That is perfectly acceptable. So, but a chord is formed, a standard triad is what we call them, is formed from the root of the chord, and oh my god, those lyrics are going to kill me. The root of the chord there, here, and it's 5th. So there's 5 notes above it. So you can count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, only counting white keys right now for simplicity's sake. If you're doing a different key, I can teach about that later if you really, really want me to show you how to build keys. Otherwise, you can just get a circle of fifths on the internet, which just shows you every single key signature available. So you can see, it should tell you what sharps and what flats go in what key. If you're, humming along a melody or something and you're not in C. But again, we're digging deep, but I still want to keep this as simple as possible so you can get the concepts. And once you have the concepts, you can basically apply them to anything. So the 5th and then a 3rd in the middle. So you count up 3 notes. Now, within the scale, of course, on the 1 is major because that's how you make a major chord. But if you really wanted to get technical with it, a major chord is 4 half steps. So if you are counting on the piano roll here, you'll notice that it's the black keys are a slight different color than the white keys on this viewer here. So if you're just counting the white keys, as I was telling you to do, then it'd be 1, 2, 2 up. So 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2. So there you go, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. But if you want to know how to build a major chord, and you can do this anywhere, it's if you're using the piano roll, which I'm assuming, just because I don't think everybody has a keyboard lying around, so you'd be using one of these DAWs, so you'd have to do that. But if you're using a keyboard to build a major chord, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So always start with 1, don't start with 0. So this isn't 0. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just counting up directly all the keys. So it's 5 and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 5 and 4. Suppose if you really wanted to be technical, if you were counting it, you could also count it as 3 and 4, but whatever. Basically, the point is that ratio is always going to be either 5 and 4 or 3 and 4. Okay, or 5 and 4 or 3 and 4. Right, there you go. So it's starting from the bottom. Always start from the bottom because it's just easier. It's 4 or 5 and 4 is how I'm going to count it here. You might see it written again as 3 or 4 and 3, but either way, that's important to note. And then if you want to make it minor, you just invert it. And why won't you go? Go down. There we go. So if you invert it, that becomes minor. Okay. So basically, instead of doing 4 and then 3, you do 3 and then 4, or 4 and then 5 rather than the other thing. So basically you just invert it. So that's the difference. This here is the difference between a minor and a major chord. That's it. So you'll recognize those patterns when you're doing things, even if you have to go back and count. But so if the bottom one looks bigger, then it's a major chord. If the top gap looks bigger, then it's a minor chord. Generally speaking, there are different types of chords, but again, we're just sticking to major and minor. I don't really want to get into anything ridiculous here. So those are how it's built. So now you can build using these Roman numerals, any scale, or figure out any chord progression in any key. Fantastic. All right. So there's a couple tried and true things that are noted as being very strong. Okay. So if you take, and I'm just going to do this for example because I think it's easier. So if you go 5, it'll want to resolve back to 1. So it'll be okay. So usually you start with the 1, but it does want to resolve back to 5. Likewise, this guy, he wants to resolve back to, yeah, because it sounds dissonant, sounds crazy, or you can just go. So, so that's called the authentic cadence. There's 2 different versions, and they're known as the strongest chord progression. So you can go from the 5 to the 1, or from the 7 to the 1, which is basically just right before it, which, logically makes sense. Mostly to note because of this guy right here. If you see this note, there's a commonality between the 5 and the 7. And that note there is what really makes your ears want to have it go back up to the 5. So that common note right there, which is the 7th note of the scale, brings it out. That's common between both of these chords and is why those 2 lead down the best. So another version of chord progression that is commonly used is the blues chord progression, which is just, oh God, which is 1, 4, 5. So that's the typical blues progression. So if you want to do a blues song, it's 1, 4, or it's actually just, it's 1, 1, 1. It's 12 bar blues. You can look it up, but it's 1, 1, 1, 1, 4, 4, 4, or 4, 4, 1, 1, 5, 4, 1. So it just kind of goes back and forth between those 2 because it's strong and it's easy to make melodies over, and so a lot of people do it. And so let me bring up one of the strongest progressions ever recorded in modern music. Let me bring that up here. I'm going to bring it up, see if anybody of you recognize it on here. Let's see. I'm just going to do this here. Let me collapse this down. Unmute, mute. View, and then. All right, see that? And this is just the bottom notes, but oh my God, it's Pachelbel's Canon in D, and most folks have heard of that. Fantastic, right? It's beautiful. It's used in like every single pop tune ever created ever, which is great. Whatever. It looks like this. Oh, I have to go lower. It looks like this on the staff. Fantastic, right? So the reason this works so well, why? Well, what is the first progression? We already established that 4 to 5 or 5 to 1 is one of the strongest ways to resolve, and it's one of the strongest progressions. But also is 1 to 5. So this goes D, and this isn't not in the key of this isn't in the key of C. But I can show you how to rewrite it in the key of C based on what we know, which is, one of the big things I want to do today. And that is going to be D, A, B, F sharp, G, D, G, A. Okay, so that's great, right? So it's 1, 5, minor 6, Oop, I have it written down here. Minor 3, 4, 1, 4, 5. Okay, so that's one way to write it. But realistically, let's break it down. Let's break it down into what this looks like. Okay, so this first section here, all right, and we're looking at the staff. If you want to look at the staff, it might be a little easier. But this section here is a fifth. Okay, so this is 1, 5. Okay, this next one is also 1, 5. How do I know? Well, because as we went over last time, music repeats. So if we took that, oh my goodness, I didn't even know you could do that in Sonar. So if you took this right here, this note, and you were like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Now you'd be like, okay, or rather, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we know that note there is the fifth. Now it doesn't sound quite right, but if we count up all the notes till 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Or yeah, 8. Yeah, if we count all the half steps, basically F sharp is the one we want. So it's the fifth. So you can tell that. So it's basically 2 pairs of fifths, and oh my god, it's another pair of fifths because G and D are fifths, and you can count that. You can just see that right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom, bada boom, bada bing. So realistically, what this is Pachelbel decided, this is 1 and 5, and then because this A is a 7. I mean, it's not the major 7, but it's a 7 to B. Oh, this can go just up, and then let's just go down to fifth again, and then again, and this is even stronger because it's the half step right here. You can see that it's only one thing, and it just wants to go back up to that note, and then we'll do the fifth again, and I guess we better, in order to have, because this repeats in the song and it just repeats over and over again, we'll go back to the fifth so it repeats back to the initial thing. So that's how we built that chord progression. And of course, it's stealable. I mean, I don't know if there's a pop artist who's never used Pachelbel's Canon. I've used it. But yeah, if you break it down, it's basically a series of inverted authentic cadences until the end there. So, until the end. So that's why the authentic cadence, and knowing that the relationship between 1 and 5 is important, because when in doubt, and if you go to the 5 basically, or the 4 is slightly weaker, but so if you don't know where to go, try the 4th or the 5th chord progression from wherever it is. And this is in major. To recap, it's generally happier. It can be somber depending on the tempo. And of course, notice this doesn't have any of the extended chords. This is just the bass line. It's just a little easier to break it down without all the extra stuff. All right, wow, this is getting long, but I want to make sure we go over one more thing here. So, minor keys are a little different, because there's 2 ways you can think about them. You can either think about them in terms of the major, which is what some people do. So basically, the relative minor, quote unquote, key of any major scale is the 6th note. So that's why it's the minor 6. You can see that it's a minor chord. It makes the minor scale if you just basically start from there. Like any scale is just where you start from. So that's, so if you start in A and you don't have any sharps or flats, instantaneously you have A minor. Boom. So that's how that goes. That's the easiness of it. But you can write it. You can write one of my favorite chord progressions, which is what I call the epic chord progression. And we'll just continue using this file here because it's easier. But say, we're not going to stay in D. Let's move back to C, but we'll, A actually. So the epic chord progression is, of course, oops, I'm being it wrong. Stop it. So the whole or whatever. I don't know. You know, pick a thing. But you know that first part there, that first bar is the epic chord progression of whatever. And that can be written as minor 6, 5, 4, okay? And then back up or whatever. Or you can think of it as 1, 7, 6, 7, or the 6 and 7 are major if you want. But writing minor scales in that way is a little weird. But the same things still apply in the minor scale. I mean, one of the easiest ways to do anything is just to have it go back to the 7 to do it, or you can actually have it go. Because that, didn't it sound like it needed to go back? Because let me try a different note. So right, like it goes to that G, and I mean, there's different things you can do, but it doesn't sound like it resolves. It sounds like it's continuing on. Whereas if you go here, it ends, and that's because again, the 5-1 is still the best cadence to use, even if you're in a minor scale. So you can think about it in both ways, either centered around minor 6, quote unquote, because. Or you can think about it as just, 1 through 7 like normal, and just keep in mind that the authentic cadence is there. So you can either do the 7 or the 1 and it'll go back. So if you're done with your chord progression, or if you're wondering why it's not resolving, that's why. So you can use this kind of as use any of these techniques as a transition, right? Something that I did at the end of Find the Light is I had this progression. Oh, stop it. So, I mean, I was doing a D major at the end there, or D minor even would work. And instead of going back to A, I put it back to G, because what is D? Well, we went over earlier, D is the 5th of G. So I was in A because it started in A, but by doing this progression down here, instead of and ending it on D, I was able to just change it over. So you can change over keys using that authentic cadence, provided it makes sense. Again, that's where you want to use your ears. So I just wanted to make sure I went over the authentic cadence and Pachelbel's Canon chord progression and how it's basically broken down into a series of reverse authentic cadences, because if you get that concept and if you're stuck, of course, try to innovate and do crazy things. But if you're stuck and you're just like, man, I need to get this done for a client, or I want to get this out because I'm trying to push myself to do different things, just be like, okay, so this is the 5th here. So what can this go up to? All right, so my chord progression is C, G, F. Oh man, F goes to, F can go up to, F can go back up to C, but F can also be used as what? This third, you can go up to F sharp and try that and see if it works out. Maybe it'll be a weird melody. Maybe you want to just transfer to a different key. There's a lot of different things you can do. And I can go over key changes more in a different thing, but I'm just letting you know that that's definitely an option on the table when you're using this method. So let me see. I think that's everything. Recap for you here. This is music theory intensive. All chords are, usually within key, and they're written as either a big Roman numeral or a small Roman numeral in music theory, depending on what, note of the scale they are. And when you see a big Roman numeral, it's a major chord. If you see a small Roman numeral, it's a minor chord. And the best chord progression is 5-1 or 7-1, minor 7-1 more specifically. And that works for both major and minor, just kind of inverted with the major, like whichever is more minor, whichever is more major, naturally speaking. Blues does 1-4-5, and Pachelbel's Canon is basically 2 sets, like few sets of minor of the authentic cadence, kind of in reverse, but still. So that is a lot of information about chords and where that relationship is. And then the big thing is the reason the 5 and the 7 are is because they both share the 5 shares the 7th note in its chord, because the chord is of course 1 3 5 of whatever from whatever notes. I tell you that that ratio as well. All right. That's it. My voice is done.